The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training facility as Sarah Martinez walked through the gate, her worn duffel bag slung over her shoulder. At 23, she had already faced more rejection than most people experience in a lifetime. Every military recruiter she had visited gave her the same dismissive look, the same patronizing smile, and the same answer. "Maybe consider a support role, miss." But Sarah wasn't here for a support role. She was here because she had something to prove, not just to the world, but to herself. Growing up in rural Montana, she had learned to shoot before she could properly tie her shoes. Her father, a Vietnam veteran-turned-rancher, had taught her that precision wasn't just about hitting a target, it was about patience, discipline, and understanding the moment when everything aligned perfectly. The other recruits stared as she made her way to the registration desk. Some snickered quietly among themselves. Others simply looked confused, as if wondering whether she had taken a wrong turn somewhere. Sarah ignored them all. She had heard the whispers before, seen the doubt in people's eyes when she told them her plans. "Name?" the gruff sergeant behind the desk asked without looking up from his clipboard. "Sarah Martinez," she replied firmly. He finally raised his eyes, taking in her slight frame and civilian clothes. "You sure you're in the right place, sweetheart? The nurse training program is across the base." Sarah's jaw tightened slightly, but her voice remained steady. "I'm here for sniper training." The sergeant's eyebrows shot up, and several nearby recruits turned to stare openly now. A few actually laughed out loud. The sergeant glanced around, seemingly enjoying the entertainment value of the moment. "Sniper training?" he repeated slowly, as if the words didn't quite make sense together when applied to the young woman standing before him. "You realize what that involves, right? Physical demands, mental pressure, technical expertise." "I'm aware of the requirements," Sarah interrupted politely but firmly. "I've been shooting competitively since I was 12. I hold state records in 3 different categories." The laughter from the other recruits died down slightly, but the skepticism remained thick in the air. The sergeant studied her for a long moment, then shrugged and handed her a form. "Your funeral, kid. Bunk assignments are on the board. Training starts at 500 tomorrow." As Sarah walked away, she could hear the murmurs starting up again behind her. She found her assigned bunk in a barracks filled with men who looked like they had been carved from granite. Each one was taller, broader, and more physically imposing than she was. When she entered, the conversation stopped abruptly. I think you're lost," said a tall recruit with arms like tree trunks. "Women's quarters are in Building C." "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," Sarah replied, setting her bag on the empty bunk. "Sarah Martinez, I'll be training with you." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Then someone in the back started chuckling, and soon the entire barracks was filled with laughter again. "No way they're serious about this," muttered a stocky recruit with a thick Brooklyn accent. "What's next? Sending my grandmother to Afghanistan?" Sarah began unpacking her belongings methodically, ignoring the comments. She had learned long ago that words were just noise unless you let them affect you. Her father had taught her that too, along with the importance of letting her actions speak louder than anyone else's opinions. That first night, she lay awake listening to the sounds of the base settling down for the night. Through the thin barracks walls, she could hear some of the other recruits still joking about the girl who thinks she can be a sniper. Tomorrow would be her first real test, and she knew that every eye would be on her, waiting for her to fail. The alarm rang at 4:30 a.m., giving everyone 30 minutes to prepare for the first day of training. Sarah was already awake, had been for an hour, running through mental exercises her father had taught her. As the other recruits stumbled around in the pre-dawn darkness, she was dressed and ready. The physical training started before sunrise. Push-ups, sit-ups, running, obstacle courses, everything designed to test both physical capability and mental determination. Sarah struggled with some of the upper body strength requirements, but she kept pace with the group through sheer willpower. When others began to flag during the 5-mile run, she was still moving steadily forward. "Not bad for a girl," panted the Brooklyn recruit as they finished the run. It was probably meant as a compliment, but Sarah chose not to respond. The morning academic sessions covered ballistics, meteorology, and tactical planning. Here, Sarah began to shine. While other recruits struggled with wind calculations and trajectory mathematics, she absorbed the information like a sponge. Her years of competitive shooting had given her an intuitive understanding of how environmental factors affected bullet flight. During lunch, she sat alone, reviewing her notes while the others socialized. She wasn't trying to be antisocial, but she knew she had to work twice as hard as everyone else just to be taken seriously. "Mind if I sit?" asked a voice above her. Sarah looked up to see a lean recruit with intelligent eyes and prematurely gray hair, despite appearing to be only in his late 20s. Unlike the others, he wasn't looking at her with amusement or skepticism. "I'm Marcus," he said, settling across from her. "Former Marine. Did 2 tours overseas before deciding to try for special operations." "Sarah," she replied simply. "I know who you are. The whole base is talking about you." He took a bite of his sandwich and studied her thoughtfully. "For what it's worth, I think they're underestimating you." It was the first genuinely respectful comment she had received since arriving. "Why do you say that?" Marcus gestured toward her notebook, covered in precise calculations and detailed diagrams. "Because while everyone else is treating this like some kind of game or test of machismo, you're actually learning. That tells me you understand what this job really requires." Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of several other recruits, led by the tree-trunk-armed giant from the night before. "Hey, Marcus, you sure you want to associate with the charity case?" the big recruit said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Might hurt your own chances when she washes out." "Her name is Sarah, Tank," Marcus replied evenly, "and I don't think she's going anywhere." Tank, apparently his nickname, laughed and looked directly at Sarah. "Tell you what, sweetheart, tomorrow we start weapons training. Real shooting, not whatever you did at your little county fair back home. When you realize this isn't for you, I'll personally help carry your bags to the bus." Sarah looked up from her notes, meeting his gaze steadily. "I appreciate the offer, but I won't be needing any help with my bags." Tank's grin widened. "We'll see about that." As the group moved away, Marcus shook his head. "Don't let Tank get to you. He's actually a decent guy under all that posturing, but he's old school. Thinks certain jobs should stay in certain hands." "What do you think?" Sarah asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I think the enemy doesn't care what gender the bullet comes from. If you can do the job, that's all that matters." That afternoon brought their first introduction to the rifles they would be using. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the weapon, not from nervousness, but from anticipation. This was what she had been preparing for her entire life, even when she didn't know it. The instructor, a weathered sergeant with cold eyes and a face that looked like it had been carved from leather, began explaining the technical specifications. Sarah hung on every word, but she was also running her hands over the rifle, feeling its weight and balance. It felt right in her hands, like an extension of herself. "Tomorrow we head to the range," the instructor announced. "We'll see who's been paying attention and who's been wasting everyone's time." As the group dispersed, Tank caught up with Sarah near the barracks. "Last chance to back out gracefully," he said, not unkindly. "Save yourself the embarrassment." Sarah turned to face him fully. "You know what's interesting about underestimation? It gives you an advantage people never see coming." Tank studied her for a moment, and she saw something shift in his expression. Maybe it was the confidence in her voice, or the way she carried herself, But for the first time since she'd arrived, someone was looking at her as a potential competitor rather than an amusing distraction. "All right, then," he said finally. "We'll see what you're made of tomorrow." That evening, Sarah cleaned her rifle with the methodical care her father had drilled into her. Each component was inspected, cleaned, and reassembled with practiced precision. Around her, other recruits were doing the same, but she noticed that several were rushing through the process or skipping steps. As she worked, she thought about all the people who had told her this moment would never come. Teachers who had suggested she consider more appropriate career paths. Guidance counselors who had recommended office jobs. Friends who had questioned her sanity. Even her own mother, who loved her deeply but worried constantly about her daughter's unconventional choices. But her father's voice echoed strongest in her memory. "Doubt is just noise, Sarah. When you find something you're meant to do, the world will try to convince you otherwise. Your job is to prove them wrong." The next morning arrived gray and cold, with a stiff wind that would challenge even experienced shooters. As the recruits assembled at the rifle range, Sarah noticed the instructors watching her more closely than the others. She understood. They were waiting for her to fail so they could confirm their assumptions and move on with business as usual. The first exercise was basic marksmanship at 100 yards. Each recruit would fire 10 rounds at a standard target, and their scores would establish baseline capabilities. Sarah watched as the first few shooters took their positions. Most performed adequately, grouping their shots within acceptable parameters. Tank stepped up to the firing line and proceeded to put 8 of his 10 shots into the bullseye, with the other 2 just outside it. It was an impressive showing that earned nods of approval from the instructors. When Sarah's turn came, the conversation among the other recruits died down. Everyone wanted to see how the girl would perform. She settled into position, feeling the rifle's familiar weight against her shoulder. The wind was gusting from the left, and she made mental adjustments for its effect on bullet trajectory. She fired her first shot. Bullseye. The second shot followed, then the third. Each round found its mark with mechanical precision. By the 5th shot, the range had gone completely silent except for the sound of her breathing and the crack of the rifle. When she finished, all 10 rounds had punched through the same small area in the center of the target. It wasn't just accurate shooting, it was surgical precision that would have been impressive for a seasoned professional, let alone a recruit on her first day. The instructor walked downrange to examine the target, then returned with an expression that revealed nothing. "Acceptable," he said simply, but Sarah caught the brief look of surprise that flashed across his face. As the morning progressed, the exercises became more challenging. Moving targets, varying distances, different positions. Each time, Sarah adapted quickly and performed flawlessly. What impressed the instructors most wasn't just her accuracy, but her consistency. Some recruits could make spectacular shots, but couldn't repeat them. Sarah was like a machine, delivering the same result over and over. During a break between exercises, Marcus found her checking her equipment. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked. "My father started teaching me when I was 7, Sarah replied, adjusting her scope. "We hunted together, did competitive shooting, practiced almost every day. He said precision was a way of thinking, not just a skill." "Your father sounds like a smart man." "He was. He died 2 years ago. Lung cancer." She paused in her work, staring off toward the distant mountains. "He always said I had a gift, but that gifts were worthless without dedication. This is my way of honoring both." Marcus nodded, understanding now why she carried herself with such quiet determination. This wasn't just career ambition or a desire to prove a point. This was personal, in a way that went deeper than anyone had realized. The final exercise of the day was the most challenging yet, a 300-yard shot at a small target in variable wind conditions. Many of the recruits struggled with the distance and environmental factors. Tank managed a respectable grouping, but several of his shots were pulled off target by the swirling wind. When Sarah took her position, she spent longer than usual studying the range. She watched the grass move with the wind patterns, noted the way dust swirled near the target, and felt the air currents on her face. Her father had taught her to read the environment like a book, to understand that the shot began long before you pulled the trigger. She fired once, adjusting for what she had observed. The shot hit just outside the bullseye. She made a mental correction for wind drift and fired again. This time, the bullet found the center of the target. Her remaining 8 shots formed a tight cluster around that first perfect hit. When the instructor examined the target, he stared at it for a long moment before walking back to the firing line. "Outstanding work, Martinez," he said, and this time there was no hiding the respect in his voice. As the recruits headed back to barracks, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. The jokes and dismissive comments had stopped. In their place was a new awareness that Sarah Martinez wasn't just some girl playing soldier. She was potentially the best shooter in the group. Tank fell into step beside her as they walked. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I judged you before I saw what you could do. That was wrong of me." "Apology accepted," Sarah replied. "But remember, this was just the first day. We all have a lot more to prove." Tank nodded, but Sarah could see that something had fundamentally changed in how he viewed her. The same shift was happening throughout the group. Respect was replacing skepticism, and earned recognition was taking the place of prejudgment. That night, as Sarah cleaned her rifle again, she felt a quiet satisfaction. Not because she had silenced the doubters, though she had, but because she was finally doing what she was meant to do. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and she would meet them with the same methodical precision that had defined her entire life. Outside her window, the lights of the base twinkled in the darkness. Somewhere out there were instructors revising their assumptions, fellow recruits reconsidering their opinions, and commanders beginning to realize that sometimes the most unlikely candidates turned out to be exactly what they needed. Sarah Martinez had taken the first step on a journey that would lead her places no one could yet imagine. But that story was still being written, one perfectly placed shot at a time. 3 months into sniper training, Sarah Martinez had established herself as the top performer in her class. What had started as a curiosity about the girl who thought she could be a sniper had evolved into genuine respect from instructors and fellow recruits alike. But respect was one thing, acceptance into the brotherhood was another entirely. The advanced training phase brought psychological pressure techniques designed to break concentration under stress. Instructors would shout insults, create distractions, and simulate combat conditions while recruits attempted precision shots. Many of the strongest physical specimens cracked under this mental pressure, but Sarah seemed to thrive in chaos. During one particularly intense exercise, the instructor stood directly behind her, screaming about her inadequacy while she lined up a shot at 500 yards. Around her, other recruits had missed their targets entirely, their nerves shattered by the verbal assault. Sarah controlled her breathing, filtered out the noise, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet found its mark dead center. She calmly worked the bolt, chambered another round, and repeated the process 4 more times. 5 shots. 5 perfect hits. "Impressive, Martinez," the instructor said quietly, his demeanor completely changed from moments before. Most people need months to develop that level of mental discipline, but not everyone was convinced that her success was sustainable. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, a veteran instructor with 20 years of experience, had seen talented recruits before who excelled in training but failed when it mattered most. "Training scenarios are one thing," he told the other instructors during a private meeting. "Real combat is something else entirely." She's never been shot at, never had to take a life, never felt the weight of mission failure. Until she's proven herself in actual operations, she's still just a good student. His skepticism wasn't unfounded. The military had tried integrating women into various roles before, with mixed results. Combat positions remained largely male-dominated for reasons that went beyond simple prejudice. They involved life and death situations where any weakness could mean disaster for entire units. Sarah understood this dynamic, even if it frustrated her. She had to be not just good enough, but undeniably exceptional. There was no room for ordinary performance when you were breaking barriers that some people didn't want broken. Her opportunity came during a joint training exercise with active SEAL teams. The scenario involved long-range reconnaissance and precision elimination of high-value targets in a simulated hostile environment. Student snipers would be paired with operational units to provide overwatch and fire support. When the assignments were announced, Sarah found herself paired with Lieutenant Commander Jake Viper Morrison, a SEAL team leader with a reputation for being both demanding and fair. His team had a perfect mission success rate over 3 deployments, and he had specifically requested to work with the top student sniper. "So you're the one everyone's talking about," Morrison said when they met at the briefing. His tone was neutral, professional, giving away nothing about his personal opinions. "I prefer to let my work speak for itself, sir," Sarah replied. Morrison studied her for a moment. "Good, because tomorrow, it will." The exercise scenario placed Sarah in an overwatch position on a ridgeline 800 yards from a compound where Morrison's team would conduct a simulated hostage rescue. Her job was to eliminate designated sentries and provide cover during the team's exfiltration. Real bullets, real pressure, real consequences if she failed. The night before the exercise, Sarah checked and rechecked her equipment. Her rifle was zeroed perfectly. Her range cards detailed every possible shot angle and distance, and her communication gear was tested thoroughly. She had prepared for every contingency she could imagine. Marcus, who had become a close friend during training, found her in the equipment bay making her final preparations. "You know you've got this, right?" he said. "You're the best shooter any of us have ever seen." "Being the best in training doesn't mean anything if I can't perform when it counts," Sarah replied, running her fingers along the rifle's barrel. "Tomorrow is when I find out if I really belong here." "You belong here," Marcus said firmly. "The question is whether everyone else is ready to accept it." The morning of the exercise dawned clear and cold, with perfect visibility across the training area. Sarah moved into position before sunrise, establishing her hide site with the meticulous care her father had taught her. Every detail mattered: the angle of concealment, the field of fire, the escape routes if her position was compromised. Through her scope, she could see the compound clearly. 4 targets had been placed to simulate sentries, each one requiring precise timing to eliminate without alerting the others. Morrison's team was positioned at the base of the hill, waiting for her signal that the area was clear. At exactly 0600 hours, the exercise began. Sarah's first target was a sentry positioned on the compound's north wall. The distance was 743 yards according to her rangefinder, with a slight crosswind that would push the bullet left. She adjusted her aim point accordingly and controlled her breathing. The shot broke clean and true. Through her scope, she watched the target indicator register a perfect hit. 1 down. The second target required a different angle entirely, forcing her to shift position slightly within her hide. This sentry was partially concealed behind cover, presenting only a narrow window of opportunity. Sarah waited patiently for the right moment, then took the shot. Another perfect hit. "Excellent work, Overwatch," Morrison's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Targets 3 and 4 on my mark." The final 2 shots needed to be taken simultaneously to prevent either sentry from alerting the compound. Sarah had prepared for this contingency, pre-positioning for rapid engagement of multiple targets. When Morrison gave the signal, she fired, worked the bolt with lightning speed, reacquired the second target, and fired again. Both shots found their marks within 3 seconds of each other. "All targets neutralized," Sarah reported calmly. "You're clear for approach." What happened next was not part of the planned scenario. The exercise controllers, impressed by the precision and speed of Sarah's performance, decided to add an unscripted complication. As Morrison's team moved toward the compound, additional enemy forces appeared from unexpected positions. "Overwatch, we've got hostiles emerging from the east building," Morrison called urgently. "Multiple targets, unknown number." Sarah quickly scanned the area through her scope, identifying 5 new targets that threatened Morrison's team. These weren't static training targets. They were instructors moving dynamically through the compound, simulating a realistic combat situation. The angle was difficult, requiring shots over Morrison's team without risking friendly fire. The distances varied from 400 to 900 yards, and the targets were moving unpredictably. It was the kind of scenario that even experienced snipers found challenging. Sarah took a deep breath and went to work. Her first shot dropped an instructor who was maneuvering to flank Morrison's position. The second eliminated a threat that had Morrison's team pinned down behind a low wall. Each shot required split-second calculations and perfect execution. "Outstanding shooting, Overwatch," Morrison called. "You just saved our mission." By the time the exercise concluded, Sarah had engaged 11 targets with 11 perfect hits. Not a single shot had been wasted, not a single opportunity missed. The exercise controllers, who had been prepared to identify areas for improvement, found themselves with nothing to criticize. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, who had observed the entire exercise from the command post, was forced to revise his assessment. "Martinez performed flawlessly under pressure," he noted in his report. "Her technical skills are matched by exceptional tactical awareness and decision-making ability." But the real validation came from Morrison himself. After the exercise debrief, he approached Sarah privately. "I've worked with a lot of snipers over the years," he said. "Some were good, some were great, and a few were exceptional. You're something beyond that. Your shooting today was the finest I've ever witnessed." "Thank you, sir," Sarah replied, but Morrison held up a hand. "I'm not finished. What impressed me most wasn't your marksmanship, though that was incredible. It was your tactical thinking. You didn't just hit targets, you prioritized threats, managed timing, and adapted to changing conditions. That's not something you can teach someone. Either you have that instinct or you don't." Morrison paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'm recommending you for immediate advancement to the next phase of training, and when you complete that, I want you assigned to my unit." It was an unprecedented offer. SEALs chose their own team members, and they rarely extended such invitations to anyone, let alone someone who had never seen actual combat. But Morrison had seen something in Sarah's performance that went beyond technical skill. Word of Morrison's recommendation spread quickly through the special operations community. Within days, Sarah found herself meeting with commanders who had never previously considered placing a woman in a combat sniper role. Colonel Williams, the senior officer overseeing special operations training, was direct in his assessment. "Martinez, your performance has been exceptional, but you understand the position you're putting us in. You would be the first woman assigned to a SEAL sniper position. The scrutiny will be intense, the pressure enormous. Any failure on your part won't just reflect on you. It will set back integration efforts for years." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Sir, I understand the responsibility. I also understand that someone has to be first. I'm prepared for whatever that requires." Colonel Williams studied her for a long moment. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison thinks you're ready for operational deployment. That's high praise from someone who doesn't give it lightly. But ready for training and ready for combat are different things entirely." Then let me prove it in combat, sir. The conversation marked a turning point not just for Sarah, but for the military's approach to gender integration in elite units. Her success had forced a re-evaluation of assumptions about what women could accomplish in combat roles. 2 weeks later, Sarah completed her final training exercise with the highest scores in program history. She had mastered every aspect of sniper operations, from long-range marksmanship to reconnaissance techniques to mission planning and execution. At the graduation ceremony, she stood among her fellow graduates, knowing that while they would return to regular units, she was headed for something unprecedented. Morrison's team was deploying to Afghanistan in 6 weeks, and she would be going with them as their designated marksman. Tank, who had become one of her strongest supporters, found her after the ceremony. "You know what the best part about all this is?" he said with a grin. "What's that?" "6 months ago, I thought I was pretty good at this job. Then you showed up and raised the bar for all of us. I'm a better sniper because I trained alongside you." It was the kind of recognition Sarah valued most, not as the first woman to accomplish something, but as a professional who had pushed everyone around her to excel. That evening, she called her mother to share the news about her upcoming deployment. The conversation was difficult, filled with pride mixed with fear about the dangers Sarah would face. "Your father would be so proud," her mother said through tears. "He always knew you were special, but I don't think even he imagined you'd go this far." "He gave me everything I needed to succeed," Sarah replied. "The skills, the discipline, the confidence to pursue something everyone said was impossible. Just promise me you'll be careful." "I promise, Mom, and I promise I'll make him proud." As Sarah packed her gear for deployment, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Every obstacle overcome, every doubter silenced, every barrier broken had led to this opportunity to serve at the highest level. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She had earned her place among the elite, not through special consideration or lowered standards, but by exceeding every expectation placed before her. The girl who had walked through the training facility gates 9 months earlier had evolved into something the military had never seen before. A female sniper ready to stand alongside the best special operations forces in the world. Her story was just beginning, and the most important chapters were yet to be written in the mountains and valleys of Afghanistan, where her skills would be tested in ways no training scenario could replicate. The Hindu Kush mountains of Afghanistan rose like jagged teeth against the pale morning sky as Sarah Martinez adjusted her scope for the 4th time in an hour. She had been in position for 18 hours, lying motionless on a rocky outcrop 1,200 yards from a Taliban compound that intelligence suggested housed high-value targets planning attacks on coalition forces. 6 months into her deployment with SEAL Team 7, Sarah had participated in 37 operations without firing a single shot in anger. She had provided overwatch for dozens of missions, gathered intelligence through long-range reconnaissance, and proven herself invaluable to Morrison's team. But she had never been forced to take a human life, and some in the special operations community still questioned whether she could cross that line when necessary. "Viper 1, this is Overwatch," Sarah whispered into her throat microphone. "I count 4 individuals in the target building, 2 armed sentries on the roof, 2 more moving inside." "Copy, Overwatch," came Morrison's reply from his position at the base of the valley. "Stand by for go signal." Sarah had been watching the compound since before dawn, documenting movement patterns and identifying potential threats. Her hide sight was perfectly positioned to cover Morrison's team during their approach, but the shot angles were challenging due to the mountainous terrain and swirling wind patterns. Through her scope, she observed the sentries changing positions. One of them seemed more alert than usual, constantly scanning the surrounding area with binoculars. His behavior suggested the team's presence might have been detected. "Viper 1, Northern Sentry appears agitated. Recommend accelerated timeline." Understood. Moving in now. What happened next unfolded with the precision of a choreographed dance. Morrison's team approached the compound using the route Sarah had recommended based on her observations. She tracked their movement through her scope while simultaneously monitoring the sentries for any sign they had spotted the approaching SEALs. The northern sentry suddenly stopped his patrol and raised his rifle, clearly having detected something. Sarah could see him speaking urgently into a radio, likely alerting others in the compound. "Contact imminent," Sarah reported. "Northern sentry is calling for backup." "Take the shot," Morrison ordered without hesitation. This was the moment Sarah had trained for her entire career, but no amount of preparation could fully ready someone for the reality of taking another human life. Through her scope, she could see the sentry clearly. A young man, perhaps 25, with a scraggly beard and worn clothing. For a split second, he looked directly toward her position, and she could see his eyes. Sarah controlled her breathing, made microscopic adjustments for wind and distance, and gently squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and 1.2 seconds later, the sentry dropped from view. "Target neutralized," she reported, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what had just occurred. The second sentry spun toward his fallen comrade, confused and searching for the source of the threat. Sarah had already worked the bolt and reacquired her target. This shot was more difficult, as the man was partially concealed behind a low wall, but she found the angle and fired again. "Both sentries down. You're clear for approach." Morrison's team moved swiftly through the compound, but Sarah's work wasn't finished. Movement in a nearby building caught her attention. Armed figures positioning themselves to ambush the SEALs during their exfiltration. "Viper 1, you have 3 hostiles in the stone building to your east. They're setting up for ambush positions. Can you engage?" Sarah studied the angles carefully. The targets were at different elevations and partially concealed, requiring 3 precisely timed shots to prevent any of them from alerting others or escaping to fight another day. "Affirmative. Engaging now." Her first shot eliminated a gunman who was climbing to a better position. The second dropped another who was moving through a window with an RPG. The third target, aware now that his companions were down, tried to retreat deeper into the building. Sarah led him slightly with her aim point and fired just as he crossed an open doorway. The bullet found its mark and the threat was eliminated. 3 hostiles neutralized, area secured. Outstanding work, Overwatch. We're beginning exfiltration now. 20 minutes later, Morrison's team had successfully extracted with their captured intelligence, and Sarah was packing up her position for the long hike back to the extraction point. She had fired 5 shots and eliminated 5 threats, allowing the mission to succeed without casualties to friendly forces. But as she moved through the darkness toward the rendezvous point, Sarah found herself thinking about the faces she had seen through her scope. Each of those men had been someone's son, possibly someone's father. The weight of that reality settled on her shoulders like a heavy pack. Morrison was waiting at the extraction point when she arrived. His team was in good spirits, having recovered valuable intelligence about planned attacks on a nearby coalition base. "Hell of a shooting, Martinez," he said quietly as they waited for the helicopter. "You saved our mission and probably our lives." "Just doing my job, sir." Morrison studied her in the dim light of the landing zone. "You okay? First kills are never easy, no matter how necessary." Sarah considered her answer carefully. "I knew this moment would come eventually. I'm grateful I was able to protect the team." It was a professional response, but Morrison could see the deeper impact in her eyes. He had been through the same experience himself years earlier, and he recognized the signs of someone processing the gravity of taking human life. "It doesn't get easier," he said, "but it does get more clear. Every shot you took tonight prevented attacks on our people. That's why we're here." 3 weeks later, Sarah's actions that night earned her a Bronze Star for valor, making her the first female sniper to receive such recognition. But the medal ceremony was overshadowed by a controversy that had been brewing since her deployment began. A journalist embedded with coalition forces had learned about Sarah's presence on the SEAL team and was preparing a story about the first female combat sniper. The article would bring unwanted attention to both Sarah and the team, potentially compromising their operational security. "We're pulling you back to base," Colonel Williams informed her during a secure video call. "The media attention is becoming a security risk." "Sir, with respect, my gender wasn't a factor in my performance that night. Why should it be a factor in determining my future assignments?" "Because politics and public relations are part of the reality we operate in, Martinez. Your success has opened doors, but it's also created complications we need to manage." Sarah understood the logic, but it frustrated her deeply. After proving herself in actual combat, she was being sidelined not because of any failure on her part, but because her success was inconvenient for military politics. The decision sparked debate throughout the special operations community. Some argued that Sarah had earned the right to continue operating without restrictions. Others maintained that the attention surrounding her presence was a liability that outweighed her tactical value. Morrison fought the decision through proper channels, arguing that Sarah was the best sniper he had ever worked with and that removing her from the team would degrade their operational capability. His recommendations carried significant weight, but they weren't enough to overcome the broader political considerations. 2 days before Sarah was scheduled to return to the United States, an urgent mission arose that changed everything. Intelligence had located a high-value target responsible for coordinating attacks throughout the region. The target would be vulnerable for only a narrow window of time, and the shot required capabilities that only Sarah possessed. The target was holed up in a compound 2,400 yards from the nearest concealed position. The extreme range, combined with difficult terrain and wind conditions, made it a shot that few snipers in the world could make successfully. "This is exactly why we need Martinez," Morrison argued during the mission briefing. "She's the only shooter we have who can reliably make this shot under these conditions." Colonel Williams faced an impossible choice. Using Sarah for the mission would contradict his orders to limit her exposure, but passing up the opportunity to eliminate a significant threat would cost lives in the long run. "One last mission," he decided. "Then she comes home." The operation required Sarah to infiltrate deep into hostile territory and establish a hide site that would allow for the extreme range shot. She would be alone for most of the mission, relying entirely on her own skills and judgment. As she prepared her equipment, Sarah reflected on how far she had come from the young woman who had walked into sniper training 18 months earlier. Every challenge she had overcome had prepared her for this moment, the ultimate test of her abilities. The night before the mission, Morrison found her checking her rifle for the 100th time. "You know, when I first requested you for this team, some people thought I was making a political statement," he said. "They couldn't understand why I would take what they saw as a risk on an unproven operator." "What did you tell them?" "I told them I wasn't making a political statement. I was acquiring the best sniper available regardless of any other considerations." Morrison paused, watching her work. "You've proven that assessment correct more times than I can count." "Thank you, sir. That means everything coming from you. Tomorrow's shot. It's going to be the most difficult of your career. Extreme range, minimal margin for error, hostile environment. Are you ready?" Sarah looked up from her rifle and met his eyes. "I've been ready my whole life." The infiltration took place under cover of darkness, with Sarah moving alone through terrain that offered numerous opportunities for enemy observation. She reached her planned position 3 hours before sunrise and began the painstaking process of establishing her hide site. The target compound was visible across a deep valley, perched on a rocky shelf that provided excellent defensive positions. Sarah calculated the range precisely at 1,427 yards, well beyond the effective range of most sniper systems, but within the capabilities of her rifle and ammunition. As dawn approached, she observed the compound through her scope, noting guard positions and movement patterns. The target was scheduled to appear at a specific window during a planned communication session, providing only a narrow opportunity for engagement. At exactly 0847 hours, the target appeared in the designated window. Through her scope, Sarah could see him clearly, the man responsible for orchestrating attacks that had killed dozens of coalition personnel and countless civilians. The wind was gusting unpredictably across the valley, requiring constant adjustments to her aim point. The extreme range meant that the bullet would be in flight for nearly 2 seconds, during which time any change in wind conditions could push it off target. Sarah steadied her breathing and made her final calculations. This shot represented not just the culmination of her mission, but validation of everything she had worked to achieve. Success would save lives and eliminate a significant threat. Failure would mean missing the only opportunity to stop a dangerous terrorist leader. She squeezed the trigger. The bullet flew true across the valley, covering the distance in 1.8 seconds before finding its mark. Through her scope, Sarah confirmed that the target had been eliminated with a single, precise shot. "Target neutralized," she reported to the command post. "Mission accomplished." The successful elimination of such a high-value target at extreme range sent shockwaves through the special operations community. Military analysts would later describe it as one of the most technically challenging sniper shots in modern warfare history. 3 days later, Sarah stood in the commander's office at Bagram Air Base, receiving notification of her reassignment back to the United States. Her combat deployment was officially over, but her impact on military operations would continue for years to come. "Your performance here has been exceptional, Martinez," Colonel Williams told her. "You've proven that gender has no bearing on combat effectiveness in sniper operations. That's going to open doors for other women who want to serve in these roles. I hope they won't face the same skepticism I encountered, sir." "Some will, initially, but you've provided a template for success that will make their path easier." As Sarah prepared to leave Afghanistan, Morrison presented her with a gift from the team, a custom scope engraved with the details of her record-breaking shot. It was their way of acknowledging not just her technical achievement, but her contribution to their brotherhood. "You'll always be part of this team," Morrison told her. "Distance and reassignment don't change that." 6 months later, Sarah found herself training the next generation of snipers, sharing the lessons learned from her deployment and helping to integrate more women into special operations roles. Her success had indeed opened doors, but more importantly, it had changed perceptions about what was possible. During a training exercise, she watched as a young female recruit struggled with the physical demands of the program. After the session, Sarah approached her privately. "Having doubts?" Sarah asked. "Everyone keeps telling me this isn't for women," the recruit replied. "Maybe they're right." Sarah smiled, remembering her own similar moments of doubt. "You know what I learned? The people who say something can't be done are usually just explaining why they couldn't do it themselves. Don't let their limitations become yours." The recruit looked up with new determination. "How do I prove them wrong?" "One perfect shot at a time," Sarah replied, "just like everyone else." Years later, when military historians wrote about the evolution of Special Operations Forces, they would mark Sarah Martinez's deployment as a turning point. Not just because she was the first woman to serve as a SEAL Team sniper, but because she had performed at a level that forced the military to reevaluate its assumptions about human potential. Her story became proof that excellence knows no gender, that dedication and skill matter more than preconceptions, and that sometimes the most unlikely candidates turn out to be exactly what an organization needs to reach new heights. The young woman from Montana who had once been dismissed as too small, too weak, and too female for elite military service had rewritten the rules of what was possible. In doing so, she had honored her father's memory, validated her own dreams, and paved the way for countless others who would follow in her footsteps. But perhaps most importantly, she had proven that when someone truly belongs somewhere, no amount of resistance can keep them from finding their place. Sarah Martinez had found hers among the elite warriors of America's Special Operations Forces, and she had earned it through excellence that could not be denied or diminished. The scope of her impact would only become clear in the years that followed, as more women entered roles previously closed to them, inspired by the precedent she had set and the barriers she had broken. Her legacy was measured not just in successful missions or medals earned, but in the expanded definition of what it meant to serve at the highest levels of military excellence.